was with the very best intentions, because we don't want the Minister saying things about revaluation that the committee has not been alerted to. And those particular three aspects are three issues that are not yet in the public domain, so the committee's heard them first. But nevertheless, I do apologise for the fact that the paper was delivered late.
It's very noble of you to fall on your sword in this instance, but when was it sent to the Minister?
Well, what I would say, it depends what version you're talking about, because there's a whole series of versions. There was the earlier briefing paper and then changes, and the minister has an input to these papers, and he wanted some aspects of the paper. This is a very important subject. This is to do with local taxation, and it's not a tick and turn issue, and the minister wanted some of the briefing to be sharpened up. So the final version went to the Minister last week.
What date exactly? Or?
I can't recall. It was late last week.
Late last week. Okay, and what steps will you take to ensure the situation doesn't recur?
Well, I will try to keep to the deadline. It was a genuine effort to get the best briefing possible to the committee. As I say, I could have played safe and simply dusted off the previous briefing that was ready for the meeting on the 28th, but I didn't think that was right for the committee, because it's such an important issue. We are reporting on a programme that is coming to a head. Things are changing, as Alan will report very shortly. Things are changing on a weekly basis, and I really did want the committee to get the very latest information on it.
Okay. Moving on to the briefing then, Brian, could you perhaps, given there's a lot of areas here to cover, do you want to take it and break it down area by area, and then we'll take questions?
I think maybe at this point I could pass over to Alan, who will report on some of the process issues, and I'll talk about some of the policy issues.
Okay, thanks very much. Yeah, maybe just to give you a bit of an overview as to where we are, and that would be, and some of the detail is within the paper, but again, apologies that you won't have had the time to read it, but it may be just important to outline where we are in this programme or project. By end of March, we had completed all of the valuations. That's our first pass of all the valuations for the offices, shops, warehouses and factories. Those are sort of what we normally describe as bulk properties, the bulk properties. And so the first pass valuation was on those. When we've been, since that date, since the end of March, QAing those extensively and looking at them right across the province. As well as that, then, we're valuing all of the other types of properties: schools, hospitals, golf clubs, sports clubs, everything else, really. And that work is more or less on target. We expect to have most of the valuations and complete towards the end of June, but we will be spending quite a bit of time still in July on things like utilities, and through July and August, finalising all of the values. The significant stages then in the process will be that through September, by the end of September, all of the values will go in their bulk form. In other words, all of a council area, the new 11 council areas. We will be doing the work with our council colleagues to produce the first draft estimated penny product EPP for each district council. That's a very important date. I have no concerns at this stage that we will not make that date, but everything else is running, and a lot of trialling is going on those figures. So we will by the early October have figures with each district council, and they will go through the normal iterative process of looking at their penny product as they move through the rate setting process. Significantly then, I suppose, through October, we will start to provide information at a high level on the movement across Northern Ireland and between districts, between property types, and that will culminate in a release, an early release for previous revaluations, a release of a schedule of the values, individual values, on the website at the beginning of November. And so each ratepayer will see their new valuation on the website at the beginning of November. Through then the period of February when the rates are struck, that's quite significant because it will be very difficult for a ratepayer to know their liability. They will know their new valuation, but because of because of 11 councils and because of revaluation, the rate pointages will change, and therefore it would be quite difficult to understand whether your liability will have increased or decreased. And so the rate pointages will be struck obviously by the districts and by the FP in the regional rate. A formal valuation will be published then late February, and that will be, be no further changes at that stage. And then by the 1st of April, the bills will issue using the new values for the first time. That rate bill will contain information for ratepayers around their new valuation and how, if they wish to challenge. There's no statutory authority to challenge the valuation until it comes into effect on the 1st of April. What we're doing is publishing early in November. We think it's a good idea to do that, to let people have a view of their valuation. And so that is the high-level plan which we're engaged at the minute, and hopefully that will be helpful to the committee.
Okay, Peter, you had a question?
Well, maybe actually just thinking about it, might be a wee bit more of it is on revaluation, but it might be more on the policy side of it, so maybe I might leave it for the moment just and then cover. Okay. Well, I mean, broadly speaking, just in terms of when we're looking at the revaluation and the notification, have you sort of worked out sort of anticipation of the level of challenge that you're expecting in connection with that, or also in relation to how you're dealing with the issue of expectations? Any sort of rejigging of any stage of revaluation? People always make assumptions. I think there's a false thinking out there of, well, prices have gone down, values have gone down, so consequently my rates billed should therefore on any form of revaluation be going down. But any revaluation, whether it's looking at domestic or non-domestic, there's an issue around expectation, and I suppose the issue particularly is because there's been that level of changes. How are you anticipating, if you like, the level of challenges? Is there anything being set aside at least then to cover that? Because even as a minimum, I could see there could be at the minimum sort of a cash flow type situation of people. And I appreciate legally, once you've been revalued, that's your bill, you're legally entitled to pay. But I can see that people have at least will drag their feet as a minimum in terms of payment if they feel they're challenging it, or they feel that they're being unfairly, as they would see it, done, sort of thing. I'm just wondering, probably the mechanical point of view, how you would see that going.
I mean, Northern Ireland historically has had a low challenge rate in non-domestic revaluations. In 1997, the challenge rate was around 11%. And in 2003, the challenge rate was around 6%. I expect the figure to be higher than those two figures. It really is a difficult one to call. People may not believe that their valuation is actually correct, but if their liability is changed in a way that's perhaps lower, they may not challenge the valuation. So there are a number of things at play here. It just depends where, as we've talked in the past, where the average sits and whether people are above or below the average. But certainly communication with the ratepayer and the business community is very important. In a sense, we are not particularly being active in the communication field at the minute because there really isn't a lot to communicate. But certainly come September, we'll see, I think, a significant ramping up of our communication to try and explain. By that stage, we will have a full picture of what has happened. And through that September-October period, as we're communicating with councils and with ratepayers to explain what is happening and try to help them understand the position, and publishing those values, which is really around, could I have rented my property for this figure? In November would be important. I'm
just wondering if there any to be a window opportunity between the November situation kicking in terms of the valuations taking effect in April, because you'd indicated from a mechanical point of view somebody can't challenge it until April. I'm just wondering to some extent whether there's measures that can be taken place which, from a practical point of view, will minimise those challenges. Sure. Obviously the information is there in it, but whether it's part of the thing, there is some sort of much more formalised mechanism to say are you seeking an explanation of why there's been a change in yours? From that point of view, because I think a lot of times people will challenge on the basis of, well, essentially either through some direct sense of grievance or alternatively simply chancing their arm that they might win at a challenge on it. But there's also a certain amount of this will be purely through a level of ignorance, not realising what way it is. And I think if we can get the message across, particularly at that point.
Yeah. I mean, I think the early release of values in early November, much earlier than ever before, will help, because that will allow Alan and his team to sort out some of the factual or data errors that they have and make some corrective action before bills even issue. But nevertheless, after the bills issue, I would expect the number of appeals to be significantly higher than any revaluation ever in Northern Ireland. A, because it's been undertaken in a downturn and expectations are that everybody's going to be a winner. And B, because the market evidence itself is not consistent. And so there are issues around the consistency in that evidence, and people will choose to exploit that. So there are two kind of things at work here that lead us to be concerned about the level of appeals.
I mean, I'm just wondering in terms of, I think it will also come down to a little bit what will happen directly in November in terms of that relaying of that information, because I think it would be helpful, while it will create an additional bit of work, if it's almost done quite proactively to encourage people to contact the department, because I think that may lead you'll probably get a large volume at that stage, and from that may actually from the van. Sorry, a little bit of heckling on the right hand side here. I think that might help sort of create a degree of filter system on the thing that where people have a fairly sort of hopeless bit,
Well, certainly that's something that I'm actively considering. Is I think precisely what you're asking, which is how do we deal with the ratepayer, and what heat can we take out of a situation? How can we allay genuine concerns and and misunderstandings? So during that period, November right through the end of March, certainly first line will be our telephone helplines. Okay. There will be a lot of information available on webs. There will be a lot of frequently asked questions. We will be very active and happy to address business groups. So we have in the past been dealing with FSB, NERTA, Breach Retail Foundation, all of the business groups, Pubs of Ulster, and our communications has been by working with those particular interest groups, and again going and explaining to those groups what has happened, what it means, what the situation is, what can ratepayers do. And so the communications will be general, non-specific to ratepayers in Northern Ireland, but also through the various business groups and through websites and telephones. No, we will not be able to deal with every person, I think, that says, I don't like my valuation. There's a significant piece of work to be done in trying as best as possible to deal with the business as usual rating work to make sure new properties are in the list. That's important for councils to keep some growth coming in the list. So we can't be facing entirely two ways at the one time. So.
And just as most, Jen, I appreciate this. Some things are a bit of grey areas between the process and the policy side. It may stray much more towards the policy end of things, but just when we're talking about revaluation, obviously, whenever revaluation was done, for instance, in England, they had, in terms of some of the council tax stuff, they had transitional schemes, but there may well have been some problems with those. I mean, is that something that's been considered, or is that something that is, shall we say, likely potentially could be more trouble than it's worth?
It is something that is being considered. Interestingly enough, and I'm going to talk about the small business rate relief consultation later on this morning, but one of the questions we're posing is that instead of having a transition scheme for the revaluation, would the money be better spent in a better small business rate relief scheme? The transition scheme we had for the last two non-domestic revaluations in Northern Ireland were directed at small properties, those with a rateable value of 12,500 and less, which is quite tiny actually. It's mostly it's small shops in small towns and more often than not offices above shops in small towns. And that's what it was directed at in the past. Since then, we've had the small business rate relief, so it does beg the question as to whether, public expenditure should be used to ease in rate bills for those otherwise facing major increases. There are some philosophical arguments as well. Many sectors benefited from the absence of a revaluation in 2010. I would say the large shops sector, certainly the out-of-town shopping centres and so on, and the large out-of-town superstores have probably benefited from the absence of a revaluation. So, the philosophical argument is, well, are we now saying that we should provide relief to those sectors because we're now having a revaluation? So all of these points have to be drawn out. We have posed the question in the public consultation in the small business rate relief consultation paper, and we'll see what we get back on that. Certainly the Welsh, the last time they had a revaluation in 2010, made a conscious decision not to put public expenditure into a transition scheme and instead to put the money into small business rate relief.
Thank you, Chair.
Okay, Deputy Chair.
Thanks very much, Chair. I noticed there your aim is to reduce, if not eliminate, manual input into bills and have an end-to-end system where from the building of the property to the collection of rates, that's done through computers. Is that a fair description of it?
There is some use of automated computer systems in the non-domestic revaluation, but nothing to the extent that we use for domestic properties. Because there's such a variety of non-domestic properties, there's a limited use. Certainly we can use it in what I earlier described for bulk properties, offices, shops, warehouse and factories. But it is about trying to get a consistent approach that we will use a computer system, and then every valuation is individually reviewed by a charter surveyor. So it takes some of the initial drudgery out of it to get a first pass valuation, but then it's manually checked. We can then look at, we can then use a computer system to see, tell me all the properties that have, are 3 times the previous NAV, or multipliers, movements, percentages. We can do a lot of that, which help us to spot some of the outliers, and would beg the question that something needs further look at. But each individual property is then looked at by an individual valuer.
Okay. You say that the computer system workflow should leverage, is that M1 or MI?
That jargon in there.
What was this?
That's in the annex to the paper under customer. It's about the 3rd paragraph down. It says computer system workflows should leverage, I think it's M1, and predefined rules to present the next collection action for collectors to remove any potential personal bias.
Oh, right. I'm sorry, Mr. Bradley, we don't have these papers in front of us. But,
no, I'm not sure which paper it is that you're referring to.
Okay.
I don't think that's in the briefing paper we sent. I'm happy to try and answer it, but I'm not sure what the...
I was just going to ask you what form of personal bias what that refer
right.
to?
The kind of the behavioural bias issue around valuers having a different, it's consistency.
Yeah. Okay.
Well, that's a good question, actually.
I think what we can do there is, because we're not dealing with a huge amount of properties. We're dealing with 72,000 properties, and when you break those down into types and locations, it is straightforward then to compare right across a sector, offices in Belfast compared to offices in Lisburn, and by looking and comparing and review, and people of some more senior level reviewing and looking for, as I said earlier, the outliers. There is a straightforward process of review and counter review and peer review, which will take away that. We will also look at the rental evidence, and it's clearly based on rental evidence, and rental evidence versus the new rateable value versus the old rateable value. And by doing all of that comparative work, that, as far as I'm concerned, will eliminate any bias that anyone has. For example, some valuer may wish to play safe, another one may wish to play a little bit more progressive. But that's really the process that we've been going through since the end of March to date, and we'll continue to do that until I'm satisfied that we've got the values as far as we can accurate.
Okay, thank you.
Aidan?
Thanks, Chair. Just how do we keep the expectations of small business owners down? And how do we dampen them? Because there is a big expectation.
In
there is
relation
going
to the impact
Yes.
of evaluation, yes, that is our concern, is that everybody's thinking, how can I lose out of this exercise?
People think
But
they
yet,
can't lose.
because rents are down since they boom in 2007, 2008. My rent's down, so therefore, if rates are based on rent, why will my rate? Well, of course, as you know, and as this committee knows, we're raising the same amount of money from the same number of people. We're just shuffling the pack, and the issue of how do we manage expectations is something. The LPS has a communication strategy. Maybe Alan, you could explain what's being done there.
I mean, we've been dealing with the repair through a number of ways. I said primarily it was through the business groups. So, we've had extensive discussions with FSB and with the Northern Ireland Retail Trade Association and others. And I think through those groups and in discussions with those particular groups, we can explain the revaluation in a way. We'll be writing out to many businesses quite shortly. We're continuing to upgrade the information on the website and trying to point people to that website, because in that way we can refresh. But I think that is where our strategy will click in really in September, October, where through perhaps media briefings and briefings to business groups, we will have to seek to manage expectations, there's no doubt. But it is important that, again, that whenever the rateable value comes out, people look at that rateable value and say, if it's £12,000, does that represent what I could have rented this shop or office for on the 1st of April 2013? And that's the question. That's the best question to be discussing in the November, December, January period, because at that stage liability is not introduced. So, first of all, have we got the right basis on which to then base someone's rate liability? So, does that represent what I could have rented the shop for on the 1st of April? If I could have rented it for more, if the rent was higher than that, well, if it's a lot less, well then perhaps then a challenge will be considered.
And what is the department put in place for these challenges? You said they're going to be more you're right, and they're going to be more now right, and you're right in saying that.
Yeah.
How are you going to deal with them?
Yeah, on the 1st of April, the process, the statutory process, is exactly the same, basically, process that exists at the minute, except that after a revaluation, when a new valuation is produced, there is an opportunity for the ratepayer to ask the district valuer to review the valuation. After that is reviewed, and if the ratepayer is not content with the decision of the district valuer, there is then a challenge to the commissioner valuation. And after, if you're not satisfied with the commissioner valuation's decision, you then have a further right of challenge to the Lands Tribunal for Northern Ireland. So there is a process there by which we can deal with those queries. There are other times that we can actually perhaps fast-step that process if there's significant cases that I believe should be heard by the tribunal. But there is a process, and it does not cost the ratepayer anything to make an application to the district valuer or the commissioner valuation unless they wish to be professionally represented.
But is that not going to add more pressure to LPS, with all these? How's that going to...
It certainly will. At this point in time, we're looking at a business case with the Permanent Secretary to adjust our staffing to be able to deal with appeals.
And when do you know what the Permanent Secretary is going to say? When will you know that there's going to be more staff to deal with that? Because, I think what we're going to get as MLAs is a lot of people coming into our office saying, I've put in this appeal to the LPS and I haven't heard tell it for 3 months, and we're going to be chasing around after it. And What about less?
Well, again, we may need to deal with the expectations in that area as well. There's no jurisdiction that I am aware of in the world that will be able to deal with all of their challenges after revaluation in 3 or 6 months. That's not a practical.
So I think if people knows that before they enter into the process.
Yep. Yep. That's a fair point.
Aye, okay, thanks.
Okay,
Just before moving off that point, it's in relation to expectations that people have. If there is an increase in the number of people who challenge it, there is always and has been cover given to them by courts in relation to paying rates while they're in an appealed position, and what mechanism is in place to ensure that they pay a reasonable rate, to ensure that whenever a settlement is achieved, that there's either not a big backlog or a big amount owed, or conversely a refund from the department.
The legislation states that it is up to the ratepayer to pay their rates in full until the valuation is changed. Now, some magistrates may take a slightly different approach or interpretation of that, but the law is the legislation is straight. You know, you have a liability based on the valuation that's currently in the valuation list until the contrary is the case. And so people should pay until in full, because some people might have a great expectation that it will be reduced, only to find that it will not, and then they will maybe have serious financial issues. The interest will be paid on a refund, but the legislation is straight. People should pay.
But you've raised another very important issue about backdating, and that's the impact on district councils as well. If you have some long outstanding appeals and major reductions that result from that appeal, that will directly impact the council in 1 year. So that is a big driver for trying to improve the appeal process.
I think we ran into this difficulty with a fairly large store in the Antrim area, where there was within 1 year, because it had been dragged out over a number of years, then there was a big hit to the regional rate, or to the finalisation of the rates, and the council had to pay back quite a sizable amount of money inside the one financial year after it was all settled. I think it ran on for a number of years.
Yes, so I mean, we agree there are very serious consequences if we don't handle these appeals properly and deal with them as promptly as we can.
Leslie?
Well, Alan thinks getting close to answer my question, but obviously to avoid a lot of this difficulty, I guess the aim is to get it right first time, and therefore the criteria that you're going to use to do the revaluation has to be crystal clear and, as far as is possible, unequivocal. Is it purely on the estimated rent value of it?
Yes. I mean,
How then do you adjust for the different areas, different rents in different parts geographically of the country?
But as you remember, we put out what we call a form of return to each non-domestic property in Northern Ireland, or virtually all of them, and asking for evidence of their current rent. Now, many are owner-occupied, so there's not going to be rents there. But we're looking at a street, and we maybe will see 2 or 3 or 4 rents.
So you have a profile and developed already?
Yeah. So we're looking at a street. We understand the relationship as valuers between High Street and Main Street. You know, we'll understand the relationship between that and a little neighbourhood store, and we're building up a picture in neighbourhood zones or whatever that we will delineate an area which more or less behaves in the same way in terms of rents. But you know, we're valuers, so we understand that we have a rent here at the corner in such a good trading position. As we come out of the town towards the country, the values will fall. So we're able to have evidence of rental levels, and then adjust and apply those levels across every property. Now, not all properties are rented, and that's a different issue. So, for the shops and offices that are owner-occupied, we can use the rental evidence that we've gleaned, set a sort of fairly standard approach, and as we move away, or a shop that is not in as good a position, we can adjust accordingly. But what we're doing is assessing, as a valuer, what could I have rented that shop for, or office or factory, on the 1st of April 2013. So it is a valuation exercise.
Yeah, you have an existing profile, but I guess that's good. But the other areas that came up in past valuations were the successes of businesses in areas, you know, their turnover, their profit or whatever else. That will not be a feature in this revaluation.
No, it's an assessment of rent.
Only.
It is assessment of rent. I mean, I suppose the only area where you do take into account a turnover situation would be in a, for example, a pub.
License.
Or a licensed premises, or there are other areas that we look at throughput, for example, a petrol filling station. But quite often that is because of location. You know, the petrol filling station, large, so many pumps, adjacent to a large supermarket, whatever, is in a far better trading position. Therefore, the throughput is an indication of what rent you would pay for it were it being rented.
Yeah.
So
But the same applies to market rents.
Yeah.
You know, for shops in particular trading locations, high rents mean a successful trading location. Low rents mean a less successful one. So,
So it's a normal commercial stick here that we're using.
pardon?
Normal commercial stick.
Yeah. Yes.
As well
that's
as
right. I mean,
higher rent.
Alan's job is not to just estimate figures. Alan's job is to interpret the market and then apply those figures. So that's all that LPS is doing.
I think that's helpful. Yeah.
Yeah.
Michaela?
Yeah, thank you, Chair. My question was in the same line as Adrian's, just a concern I have about the expectation of the significant amount of appeals and the process and how that will be managed, because I do see that you do have on your presentation about the enhanced telephone handoff to WARM in terms of being put through to the operator and making sure that they get through to the proper person that they need to speak to. Now, Alan, you did say earlier on that not everybody will be spoke to personally that has an issue in terms of their new rate. But one thing, just for clarity, that I'm looking for is people will, or the customer will see that their evaluation on their new evaluation on the website in November, but on April, they don't have the right to do anything in terms of an appeal until April, until it comes into force.
Well, they can request an informal appeal. They can contact
In between.
LPS and say, look, my valuation just doesn't appear right. And Alan will look at it and see whether they've got maybe the wrong information about the property or something like that, and they can make corrections.
There's that
before bills
recourse in
issue.
between. That they-
So there is an iterative process that can go on in that period. Now, that's not to say that Alan will satisfy everybody that phones up, but there will be some where there are data issues, I think, to deal with.
yeah, again, I have to balance between, there's 2 or 3 things going on here at one time, because we'll be putting in a major effort in terms of revaluation up to the sort of July-August period. Other more normal rating business, non-domestic rating business, will get slightly behind. I want to be able to catch up come September, October. So September, October into November will be very busy months all around. I have to balance getting new properties in the list for the sake of the council's altered properties valued, other challenges against this current list dealt with. I can't take all my resources and immediately switch them for the 1st of November dealing with ratepayers on their new valuation. However, I totally understand, been through situations like this before, and we will seek to put in place telephone helplines, email systems, and as Brian said, we will seek to review as much as we possibly can, certainly spotting the ones, well, I would hope by now, all of the too many knots at the end of an evaluation are well cleared by now already. But we will seek to try and help people as much as we possibly can. But there's no point in me saying to the committee that I can deal with every single person. Because number one, I don't know what number that will be. Some people will be reluctant perhaps to say or ask anything until they understand, is their liability increased or is it decreased? And so it is at this point in time quite difficult to know what numbers of people we will have. We will seek to be able to answer phones. We will seek to be able to take emails and, where possible, deal with it in one-to-one. But it is quite a tricky area at the minute.
Yeah, can I just come back on that? Just in terms of your staff and your capacity, how are you dealing with, I mean, obviously we're preempting that there may well be significant amount of appeals. What are you doing with your staff currently to engage with them and communicate that concern, and obviously, put in other resources if you have to? What's the level of communication?
Yeah, I mean, the business case at the minute is around doing some restructuring of the valuation part of LPS. because it's a different, slightly different profile of staff when you're dealing with challenges to a non-domestic revaluation than when you're in a sort of business as usual period. And I mean, obviously, we will use the most experienced rating valuers in doing the challenges and certainly doing the more complex cases. We will be, our staff are carrying out the revaluation, so they understand. And many of those staff that have been putting the values on will be in a position expertly to review the valuations. But we are looking at our staffing profile to make sure we do not get into the position that Mr. Gervin talked about earlier. We were in a very different situation then, because we came out of a non-domestic revaluation and went immediately into a domestic revaluation, so the pressures were immense. But certainly we're looking at our staffing. We'll be looking at the whole communications, how we call handle, how we deal with correspondence. We're in a non-statutory, no protocols world at the minute, and we will seek to agree and set those protocols out clearly to the public, to elected representatives, how we deal with that situation during the November to March period.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, Brian, you want to move on to small business rate relief?
Yes. The committee, I think, has a copy of the consultation paper, which is part of the evaluation process. As the committee will know, we've engaged the services of the Northern Ireland Centre for Economic Policy at the University of Ulster, and I can report that the project is on track. There were significant delays, however, in getting access to some of the LPS data, and that held us back a bit, but I understand this is recoverable, having spoken with NICEP within the last 24 hours. Their business survey is underway. I got a report there at 5 to 10 before this meeting, and they've now surveyed over 300 of their target total of 500 businesses, and that is now well underway and producing results. In terms of if the committee is interested in some of the views that have been expressed in that survey, some businesses felt that small business rate relief was very helpful for cash flow. Others felt it helped them recover or at least sustain the business through difficult times. But businesses have found it very hard to identify additional investment as a consequence of small business rate relief. But the benefit they do get from it is improved cash flow during the downturn, and as I say, help sustain them or help the business recover during the period of downturn. In terms of the questions we've asked, well, how should it be paid for in the future? As you know, the current scheme is part paid through a large shops levy. I think the views expressed so far have been that this should come out of public expenditure. But we're early on in this process, and I'm just giving you some emerging findings from the business survey. The public consultation is open to the 1st of July, and this is fairly typical for public consultation. Nobody responds until the last week, or maybe the week after the last week. But at the moment, there's only one response from MGM Marine, which is a private business. But NICEP has taken calls from other business support organisations and district councils who plan to respond to the consultation. So there is an active engagement on that. We're also planning 20 targeted consultation meetings with representative organisations in August after the public consultation is over, and that includes small business, the Federation of Small Business, and other business groups, councils, and third sector organisations. The Northern Ireland Independent Retail Traders Association has already met staff in NICEP for a face-to-face consultation. And that's about it. We are in the process of arranging those meetings at the moment, and we'll be issuing letters within the next couple of weeks for those consultation meetings to occur. We're on track for a draft report at the end of the summer to help inform policy decisions in September. So that's a very quick run through. You have the consultation paper as well. If there are any questions arising out of that or any points you want to make about the process, I'm more than happy to answer them.
Okay, thanks very much. Can I ask you how confident DFP is that the policy of evaluation of small business relief will establish firm evidence for or against the continuation of the policy? For example, facts and figures rather than stakeholder opinion on the contribution of the relief to business survival or on the level of reinvestment by the beneficiary businesses.
Well, that's certainly the objective of this evaluation, is to get a firm evidence base for making decisions for the future. Now, whether that leads to a different small business rate relief scheme, a similar small business rate relief scheme, or no small business rate relief scheme, it's too early to say. But that's certainly, you've identified exactly what the objective of this evaluation is. It's not just gathering opinions, it's gathering evidence of effectiveness of the current scheme.
If we were to get a positive decision on corporation tax, would that impact on the small business rates relief scheme?
I would be surprised. It's not something anybody's ever had a conversation with me about, as not something that's ever occurred to me. Somebody did mention to me last week there was a launch of a book by Northern Ireland Manufacturing up in one of the rooms on the first floor in Stormont.
That's right.
And somebody was concerned that industrial derating could change if there was a change in corporation tax. But nobody from government has ever mentioned that, so that's the only time that anybody's ever made a connection like that.
Okay. Any members got questions?
Just one, and I'm just looking at a table here, and it's really small business rate relief awarded since 2010. The bottom figure is that there's 44 million. 42,000 some odd pounds have been compensated by that amount of money. You have alluded to a number of different models that we might have to look at some stage. That figure has obviously been absorbed by the executive from what
It's effectively revenue foregone.
Yeah.
So it's keeping money in the pockets of business rather than the pockets of government. So
where I'm wanting to go, and this is something which, has there ever been any work carried out or surveys carried out with the numbers of businesses, because there are 25,000 businesses that have taken advantage or can take advantage of this, 31 previously, but the new figure is 25, so obviously some have went to the wall that were receiving that, but has there ever been a body of work done to identify the net value that has given back to those businesses?
Yeah, that's exactly what the business survey is seeking to do, and they're going to survey 500 businesses in receipt of small business rate relief to determine what difference it made to them. And as I reported earlier,
but will it be a financial figure that they will put on that, or will it just say that, well, if we hadn't got it, we would?
Well, we know we know how much the relief was worth to each business, because we have that analysis already.
But it's what it's worth.
But it's what difference did it make to the business? And that's exactly the question. We have a very detailed, or NICEP has developed a very detailed questionnaire to try and see how business behaviour changed as a consequence of small business rate relief. Most businesses reported that it was a great help to them during the downturn in terms of cash flow. Others felt that it was useful for them in terms of either sustaining the business or helping to recover the business. But businesses have struggled to identify any particular investments that they have made as a consequence of it. But and that process, NICEP has undertaken, it's over 300, as of 10 to 10 this morning, it's over 300 businesses have been surveyed out of a total that they intend to survey of 500, so that works very well advanced.
Thank you.
Adrian?
Well, will it be taken into account what the big businesses saying who are actually paying for that relief?
Yeah, well, I mean, the Minister and his predecessor have already announced that is not going to continue. The large shops levy is not going to continue after March 2015 because the revaluation will take effect. So it's not an option that's being considered at the moment. But what we are asking people, as well as how effective do you think the scheme has been, is how do you think we should pay for it in the future? And it's too early to report back on that issue. Certainly, those that have been surveyed to date, most feel that it should come out of public expenditure. But we haven't had any other views back yet. But it is a question we're asking.
Yeah, and I'm interested to see what other ratepayers would think of public expenditure paying for those small businesses as well. But I understand the need for it as well.
Yeah, that's a very good point.
Thank you. Leslie?
Just on that table, Brian, that we were talking about there, the number of properties that have benefited from the small business relief scheme. Obviously, the large shop levy comes in there too, doesn't it? It's part of that.
Yes, the large shops levy would contribute about 6 million a year.
Out of that 44 million?
No, well, the 44 million is a cumulative figure, isn't it? Yeah. The 44 million is cumulative. The actual figure is per year, it's what, 18 million or something now, isn't it? Yeah, I think it's around 18 million currently a year. The reason that it's been in place for 3 years, the reason is it's been increased year on year, so you can't just multiply the 18 million. The 18 million is its current state, but that's a cumulative figure, the 44 million.
The other interesting thing, Brian, is that, again, that's a cumulative figure I'm looking at. You know, we've gone from 31,000 businesses, Paul's pointed out here, to 25. So those 6,000 businesses, 20% of the original 2010 figure. Has any exercise been done as to see what happened to them? Did they go into the bigger lot and therefore didn't qualify, or did they simply cease trading?
But it's hard to tell. I mean, businesses come and go, businesses evolve, businesses grow, some businesses move. We haven't undertaken any analysis to explain.
Just be interesting to see.
But it's
could be a success indicator.
I think we should get NICEP to have a look at that.
Thank you.
Okay, no other questions?
Well, just on that, because it's an interesting point. Is there, I mean, that is a practical exercise. You can identify them if you decide that information is useful. I mean, do
I think we can
have a
certainly
unique identifier or something on the register?
Yeah, we'll know the address of every one of those 31,000, and we'll know the same for the 25,000 that currently get it. So we can certainly do a sampling exercise and see what was the reason. Why did they drop out of the scheme?
But none of the other agencies, enterprise or whatever, who would have clearly an interest in the profile of the economy and the changing profile. Yeah. There's no kind of cross-cutting.
But once the NICEP has undertaken its analysis, this will be of great interest, I would imagine, to invest in various other government agencies.
In planning.
And in relation to district councils, of course, with their new, improved economic development powers as well.
And just a wee final point again that intrigued me. Did any of the responses from the consultation surprise you? I mean, some of it is fairly predictable stuff.
Well, yeah, the responses to the formal consultation, there's only one in yet. There's the business survey that's going on in parallel with that, which is NICEP has an agency that makes a phone call, has a very detailed questionnaire. People answer over the phone, and the results I've explained so far are in relation to that survey. And as you're right, there's nothing terribly surprising coming out of that.
Do you see the point that Michaela was making, which could, I suspect, throw an inordinate kind of load back on, yourselves in particular, I would suggest on, perhaps anticipation of the questions and the explanatory information would defray quite a bit of that. People have an unrealistic expectation, and perhaps we could provide them with the answer to that before waiting on them to ask us.
Yeah. Well, the piece of work, this survey is solely focused on small business rate relief. We haven't asked any questions about the revaluation, and we haven't taken the opportunity to communicate. It's a scientific sample of 500 that we're using just to inform future policy development, small business rate relief.
Okay, I'm just thinking more about planning this exercise out in its entirety and maybe anticipating some of the log jams that appear to be in front of us.
Yeah.
Anyway, it doesn't mean
well, it's something that Alan, I think, needs to consider in relation to the telecoms policy that they have.
Okay, thank you.
Okay. Thanks, Mitchell. And Tracy, Brian and Alan, thank you very much. And no doubt you'll keep us up to date on any developments with regards to these matters.
Right, okay. Chair, there's a number of other issues I think that the committee wanted to be updated.
Do you want to say a few words about the rates convergence, perhaps?
Yes, if time permits, I'd
Just the
just like
headlines, as it were.
to let you know that the consultation has begun. In relation to that, it extends until I think the 19th of August. I've already undertaken some work in relation to that. NILGA have been very helpful to this process. I've already addressed, there's about 50 or 60 new councillors at a meeting in the Loughney Centre down off the M1 on the 30th of May. There's a major consultation event planned for the 30th of June through NILGA, and I'm already arranging bilateral meetings with local government, with particular local government officials, and we're also available to talk to ratepayer groups. We've also had quite a number of hits on our website now. I think we're almost beyond the 300 mark in terms of people accessing the consultation paper. So it is something of great interest to everybody. What I would say is that we're not going to please everybody with this rates convergence scheme. You know, depending on where you live will depend on what answer you give, I think. And but I think the department wants to try and get the right balance in relation to delivering an effective convergence scheme.
Okay. Did you want to ask?
Yeah, just on, I mean, I appreciate obviously the consultation documents out at present, so therefore it's maybe limited, I think we said. But there's a couple of issues, I suppose, is there any consideration being given issues where there is a sort of wide divergence? Mentions obviously made you've got effectively the envelope of 30 million, and I presume it's effectively ring fence at that.
Yeah.
That's the sort of, it's a question simply of how that ultimately is distributed. Is there any consideration being given in some of the areas to phasing in over a longer period? Because obviously we're reaching, and you mentioned about not everybody's going to be happy. Is there some examination and maybe balance between, because I can see in some areas where there's a wide divergence, you're trying to close that gap, and for those ratepayers there's significance there. But also I suppose for some council areas they will maybe express a little bit of annoyance if everything simply goes to the areas where there's a wide divergence. They will say, actually, well, the 2 or 3 councils in a particular area have worked closely together to try and ensure that actually their rates are fairly similar, and they see, if you like, for what might be described as good behaviour, you know, almost being penalised because no money potentially could come that direction. Well, is there some degree of balance then to be struck there?
Oh yeah, and that's what this consultation is all about. The 30 million will deliver a 3-year scheme and help everybody, even if it's only a few pence. Or you could cut and dice it other ways. You could distribute it in other ways. You could focus more money on those areas facing larger district rate increases, such as the ratepayers, both domestic and non-domestic, in Castlereagh, or ratepayers in Fermanagh. You could decide to have a longer scheme for them, but to have a longer scheme for some means a shorter scheme for others, or the application of some sort of thresholds. But that's exactly what the consultation is about. How do you want to distribute this relief? And that's the question we're asking. As I said, we're not going to please everybody. The answers people give will depend on where they live.
And obviously, given the fact then that it's a situation which consultation is due to go into August at some stage,
yeah.
And that, but obviously, given to ensure then that councils have an idea of how that impacts on their. Well, I suppose they'll be setting the rate anyway, but... Well,
that's exactly the point. They will be setting the rate anyway, and the councils won't get this money. It's ratepayers will get a discounted bill. Or those ratepayers who would otherwise face sudden increases will get a discounted bill.
We're looking, I suppose, then, we're looking sort of then final decisions on that at some stage in the autumn?
Yes. Yeah.
Okay, Paul.
I mean, from an operational point of view, LPS will have to apply 22 district rate discounts. You know, 11 for domestic for the 11 new councils and 11 non-domestic for the 11 new councils.
Okay, Paul.
Just on the point, I appreciate the £30 million, and we're going into consultation on this matter. What's the necessity to go down this route of consultation whenever we would already made a decision to actually do it?
Well,
are we wasting time doing that?
Well, I don't think so. The sort of scheme has already been decided, which is a district rate discount for ratepayers, both domestic and non-domestic. And we're not going to exclude any categories of property or any types of ratepayer. It's an edging up of the district rate in those areas that would otherwise face sudden and excessive increases.
Just a matter of leveling the playing field
So
for everybody.
the sort of scheme has been decided. What we're asking in this consultation is on the detail of the scheme and how do you want to distribute this 30 million? And how best should we distribute this, and what's the fairest way to distribute this? But you're quite right. The main framework of the scheme has been decided, a long time ago, and has been agreed with ministers and so on. So we're talking about the detail here, but it's important detail. It's important detail to ratepayers in Fermanagh. It's important detail to ratepayers in Castlereagh and ratepayers throughout Northern Ireland.
Well, I do think that there is, on the back of what Peter has just said, some areas which have actually used the opportunity for planning, knowing that RPA was going to kick in at some stage, have used the opportunity to actually try and minimise the hike or the whatever, so as there was more of a level playing field between the two of them. I think those councils are probably not going to be benefiting from having a subsidised rate, and that's the way I look at it.
Well, it won't be the councils themselves, it will be ratepayers.
Yeah, the ratepayers.
Because it will be a discounted bill.
But at the end of the day, it reflects very much upon a council as to how they're achieving, what level they set the rate at. And those councils who have, for want of a better way of putting it, tried the best to actually level the thing out, are not going to get any reward for it.
But there are councils where the disparity has been so great that has not been possible as well. So there are issues around that too. But points well made.
I can see the table. The table very, very clearly demonstrates, that there are some areas that are going to have big difficulties.
Thanks, Paul. Adrian?
Two wee quick ones there. Just will the revaluation that we were talking about earlier, will that complicate the whole system on this year, or what? Especially for non-domestic.
Yes, that's a very good point. And what we were talking earlier about a transition scheme for revaluation. This is a very widespread transition scheme that we're going to have for review of public administration and reorganisation of local government. If you then want to bolt on top of that a transition scheme for the revaluation, it's going to make bills very difficult to understand. I mean, I think I would struggle to understand them, and I do rates. It's so for ratepayers, I think there is a whole issue of public comprehension about having two transition schemes running at the same time. So that's why we've posed the question in the small business rate relief consultation: would we be better, maybe instead of having a transition scheme for revaluation, putting more money into a possible small business rate relief scheme?
Well, and also, just I want to ask you as well, 30 million was agreed to put into this year.
Yeah.
Is that the total, or are there any chance of getting more? Or
that was the decision of the executive, and that's that's the order that we've been given. That 30 million is the cost envelope that we're working within, and that's what all of our analysis has been pinned upon. There is in the legislation, the Local Government Act, a provision for a mid-term review on the effectiveness of the scheme. So I'm not saying that more funding would come as a result of that, but there is a mid-term review to look at it.
I didn't realise that.
But the executive were pretty clear at the outset that was the limit of funding, and given the current level of overcommitment in public expenditure, I would be very surprised if there was more money available. But that's a political decision. That's for ministers to decide. It's not for me as an official to give a view on.
Brian, are there any other issues that you want to headline with us at the moment?
Well, there was. I'm looking for the agenda here, Chair. There were a number. There was. Did you want to talk about the sport and recreation relief or the private members bill, or is that something for another?
No, that's for later.
Is that for later, right?
Okay.
I could very briefly tell you, I realise we're running behind time, but I could very briefly tell you that on the rate rebate side of things, as I mentioned at the last session, we are, because of the delay in the delivery of universal credit, throughout the UK, never mind Northern Ireland, we are looking at longer term options for completely redesigning rate rebate. The policy options we presented to the committee before were for an interim solution, but we're now looking beyond that. We've set that to one side. We may still need the interim solution, but we're looking at long-term solutions now, and the Analytical Services Unit and DSD are undertaking some policy analysis for us, and when we have some clarity on that, I'll report back to the committee.
You asking for more time?
Pardon?
You asking for
Please.
Thanks very much, Tracy, Brian and Alan. Thank you. Members, we'll move on to item number 5 on the agenda, DFP performance against PFG and business plan targets. So we have a briefing from the Permanent Secretary and his colleagues. The session has been allocated about 50 minutes, and I know that some members have to be away at 12, so we'll do our best to keep within the time. This session has been recorded by Hansard, so therefore all electronic devices, with the exception of the committee tablet, should be switched off completely. The following documents are available to you. Performance against 13-14 departmental targets at 31st of March 2014. There are pages 59 to 76 of your packs, and also the RAG assessment guidelines at page 77 of your packs. So I'd like to welcome the Permanent Secretary, Stephen Pover, Mrs. Catherine Hill, Head of Business Planning and Corporate Governance at DFP, and Ms. Bridget Worth, Financial Director at DFP. And could I just say that we've heard that Stephen is retiring from his post, and this will be his last appearance before the committee, so that explains his sad countenance.
7 working days to go, Chairman.
He has been in a number of departments. I think I remember him first in Department of Education, and
he was in health before that.
You were in health before that, in the Department of the Environment as well. So he's had a long career, and he will be replaced as Permanent Secretary by David Sterling, who is moving from the Deputy Department. So just want to congratulate Stephen on his retirement and wish him a long and happy and uninterrupted retirement, and thank him for all the good work that he has done, especially in working with the committee here. So without further ado, I'll ask members to begin with questions, okay? And Adrian is number 1.
Thank you. Well, can I wish you all the best to you for your retirement? Associate everything the Chairman has said. Always find you very open and approachable, you know, and I think that's important to have that relationship. I want to ask you around the devolvement of the corporation tax. You know, just where we're at the moment on that there, and what have we done to date, and what's happening in the future.
Well, what we're looking at still is an announcement in the autumn, a decision in the autumn by the UK government, and an announcement no later than the autumn statement. Work's been going on between ourselves and Treasury and HMRC officials. In fact, I think the officials met no later than last Friday. So there's still discussions going on. We're still working out so that we're ready if a decision is made. There's no substantive progress. We're still in the same position we were the last time we spoke with this, that the decision by the government will be triggering point, and we won't know that until
if the decision is positive, then what happens after that there?
They have to introduce legislation before the general election next year, 25th. So it's a pretty tight time frame from the autumn through to for the general election. And that gives the executive the power. The executive then has to decide what it wants to do, whether it wants to take the power, use the power, and if so, what way it wants to apply it, and what sorts of levels, and what the impact will be of moving to different levels of corporation tax, and the impact on the block grant from Treasury. So those processes will start once there's any.
There's no issues that you need to be
aware
of between no new issues, maybe.
No new issues. No, we're still in discussion. it's in our interest to argue the figures down as low as possible. Try to do what we can. That's what I'm having constructive relationships with both Treasury and HMRC. And HMRC have appointed a senior responsible officer now to manage their side of the project, so it's working well. And if I understand, the working relationships are good.
That's good. Thanks, Chair.
Okay, thank you, Adrian. Paul?
Thank you very much indeed. And it's really to do with the collection of rates and the targets that have been set. And there are two areas that are identified as red on our table. And one of them actually, and I appreciate it, it's maybe a small percentage of an overall fairly large sum, but in setting those targets, we failed to hit it by 6.9 million in relation to the monies being collected. And what mechanisms are being put in place to ensure that we do hit the targets, albeit we aimed, and it's a lot better than it was the previous year. And I have to give, we have to actually, put that on record that there's a fairly substantial increase from what happened in the previous year. But how can we ensure that we're going to collect what we say we're going to collect?
Okay. A few sort of general comments. We have exceeded our performance against that target in the last few years. It's only this year that we haven't hit it. In some ways, I find that reassuring that we haven't hit it, because it means that we're not just setting targets that are too easy. The committee has mentioned that as a possibility before. So we weren't far short. We were 1138 million. So it was the target was 1145. So we weren't far with 6 million, in the grand sometimes it's about 0.6% of the total. So I'm slightly reassured in that we have tried to set challenging targets, and in some ways it's a slight reassurance when people don't actually meet them, because get close but not actually meet them. That indicates that we are actually applying stretching targets to LPS. We're in discussion with the Minister at the moment about what next year's targets would be, and he wants us to put ambitious targets in. And as part of this process, you're saying, how do we ensure we meet them? Well, the first thing to do is to agree whatever the target's going to be with the Minister. It's his decision at the end of the day. He is keen for us to set an ambitious target for LPS, and it's our job then to deliver it. If John Wilkinson were here, he did offer to come along today, actually. I told him I'd try and do it myself. If John were here, I think John would point to a lot of things. We're going to have a lot of turbulence in the current year. We're still facing quite a difficult economic situation. Businesses are failing. We're facing liquidations and dissolutions of businesses. And John is concerned, he's retiring as well at the end of August, and he's concerned that the two of us would leave our successors with unachievable targets and leave them open to the committee's criticism next year. So it's trying to strike a balance between a target which is demanding and ambitious, as the Minister wants, and one which is more or less achievable. I mean, I don't mind whether I'd like us to hit the target, to exceed the target, but in a sense, we want to make sure the target is not just so easy that we can easily achieve it. We want to have a target that does actually provide a bit of push for the department and for LPS. So we haven't. The Minister, I think, is still in dialogue with us over what the target for next year should be. I saw correspondence yesterday from him. And we'll have to agree that as a target. So we will bend our systems to try and achieve those targets. What I would say is that the positive counterpoint to that is that we did better than we expected on the debt target. We exceeded our recovery of debt. And if you can recall the discussion we had last time I was here, we were talking about the way in which we need to have a more complex debt target, because our debt is not just one big block of 160 million. Some of that is debt that's actually in payment through payment arrangements. Some of it's in direct debits, some of it's in actually in recovery through the court system and so on. So following up the discussion with the committee last time, we have been just talking to the Minister about having a different sort of presentation of the debt figures.
Well, that leads me on, and I appreciate it, and I do want to put on record, that there has been improvement, and it isn't good to set targets that are easy.
Yeah.
And it's maybe not bad whenever you're just coming close to hitting target, but it's not quite reaching it. This, it shows that we are stretching it slightly. But that brings me back to the point. One of the targets, and I don't believe it's maybe the right heading, because I don't think it's the correct one. Increase by 10% the amount of debt secured through courts and enforcement.
Yeah.
Now that doesn't make sense to me.
No, it doesn't.
And I'll tell you why, because you did allude to the fact that we have increased the amount of money we've recovered.
Yeah.
But that doesn't always mean that you have to take somebody to court to do that. I appreciate that there has been a body of work, and we've been encouraging people through our own offices to actually engage with LPS, to come to agreements, to save going down the route of enforcement, of going through the HAO, you know, and I think that that's a way that we should be trying to reduce costs as well, because by the time you take everything to court, there's fees added on. So is there any way that you could actually look at what is target number R1.09? Because I don't actually think it is a sensible approach. I appreciate that recovery of debt is an overall figure. It should be something, but I'm not so sure that that heading actually helps anybody. It shows up red here, but I would be very annoyed if we were reaching 10%, because then you're saying you're taking more people through courts, and sometimes the only course through courts is to end up in bankruptcy, and as a consequence you receive nothing. So, you know, I'm wondering if has there been any discussion around this area?
The answer is yes, and I'm glad you said this, because we have decided, subject to the Minister's Agreement, we've decided to drop this as a ministerial target. Okay. On the very basis you just described, that it encourages, in a sense, perverse behaviour. It works perversely. Our preference is to negotiate with people who owe us money and try and get the money back. Going to court is the last option, and if you set yourself a target of taking a particular percentage of people to court, then in some ways you more or less have to do that. So it works against the negotiated arrangement. So I think we'll keep it as a measure of performance. So if we do want to, we do have to take some people to court, and we want to make sure that we do that effectively and efficiently and in appropriate circumstances. But we're more interested in recovering debt by other means, and that would involve us, by and large, in getting people onto direct debit, getting people into negotiated arrangements where they pay previous year's debt as well as the current year's rates bill and so on, and doing that through negotiation and contact.
Well, I think that's. But I'm looking at things from very practically. I think that's the way I would look at it.
Yes, and I'm glad we're one mind about this now.
Well, it makes sense to me. But and just on a final note, I want to wish you all the best, and the weather will stay like that.
I'm heading for Donegal first 3 weeks in July, and I don't know whether. Well, I'll keep my fingers crossed.
Okay, just I raised another discussion you had with Paul there whilst answering his question. I noticed that the vast majority of the targets in the 13-14 plan were achieved, and obviously have to congratulate you on that. But might there be a case for setting, as it were, threshold targets and then stretch targets, which in some cases you might be in a position to go beyond?
I think we do, as a matter of practice, try and exceed the targets. It's not just it's not a landing on the spot. We try and improve. We're trying to say about end-year underspends and things like that. I mean, we have improved our performance significantly over the last few years, and this last year has been the best year I think we've ever had. We came within, on the resource side, we came in with 0.2, was it, of an underspend, which is about as close to zero as you can get without Bridget losing sleep for months beforehand. So I mean, we do. You're right. We don't see them just as a stopping point. We've got our target. We'll stop now. We will keep working on and try and improve. And on the LPS debt target, for example, we did overachieve it. That's quite a difficult target to achieve, and we're very pleased. In fact, I'm particularly pleased that we've actually begun to see debt come down, and I'd like to see that happen more strongly in the future. But that's a matter for the Minister to agree with the target he wants us to set for it.
Okay, thank you. Peter?
Thank you. I suppose on the subject of targets, we'll turn to a different aspect, which is the sickness and absence target. I suppose there's a couple of issues in relation to that. I mean, you had a situation that across the civil service there was a target of 9.5 days. I don't know whether a day like that maybe you're intended to phone in a sickie in that regard with imminent retirement in that regard, but you had a target of 9.5 days, which then wasn't met.
I think so.
But yet the next target is actually lower than that. Now, is an argument that possibly then it's a slightly pointless exercise to be reducing a target which wasn't met in the first place. And I suppose then there was a specific target also then for DFP of 8.1 days, which also wasn't met. Or just if you could maybe tell us the reasons for that.
Okay. First of all, I think just a comment on the targets. They've been in place for a while, and the targets I think are largely, I don't mean this in a derogatory way, but they're sort of largely mathematical targets. There's a downward slope, and it's an objective for us all to aim at. The departments are different. Small departments, a few hundred staff like DECAL. Departments with large bodies of professional staff rather than admin staff tend to have better outcomes in sickness absence terms than the big departments like DFP or DSD and so on, ones with thousands of staff. The gender makeup of staff, the age profile of staff, the staff staying longer past 60 now. There are more people who may well have health problems. It's a common feature of getting older, like myself. And we have been acting. I think this last year has well, we didn't hit the targets. We have done better than the previous year. In the case of DFP specifically, our figure for 2012-13, I think the outturn was 10.6 days. We don't know the confirmed outturn for this year yet. This year just passed, but we think the 13-14 will be 9.7. Is it? I can't remember that.
Yes, 9.7.
It's dropped by a full day in 1 year. We think that's attributable to a different approach to managing, particularly long-term sickness absence, because although people tend to talk about people taking Mondays and Fridays or nice sunny days off. That isn't actually the problem. The real problem for us is long-term absence, and we have brought down the number of long. At the end of the previous year, our average number of long-term absence was about 90-something, 93. And last year I think it was 58 at the end of I haven't got the figures with me, but so by working with staff, making sure they work through the occupational health service, making sure there's continuing line manager contact with staff who are off on sick leave, and trying to work them back into the system as quickly as possible. We have shaved a day off the outturn for the current year, and that was that. We've been coming down for a number of years, and then the 12-13 year went up, which was a disappointment to us. But we're now back on the downward trend, and we're not at our target anywhere near it. But we are doing, relatively well in comparison with the previous year, and we think we'll have to do a proper evaluation. But we think that the new approach to tackling particularly long-term absence is actually beginning to bear fruit, and that we'll see further reductions. We've only had a couple of months of this year, the 14-15 year so far, but the figures are quite encouraging for those couple of months. The other thing, generally, we have been in discussion amongst the permanent secretaries about what else might be done to try and bring the figures further down. The PFG target is to reduce absence. The PFG objective is to reduce absence. The targets are not part of the programme for government per se, but we're keen to try and get the figures down.
Just Stephen, on that sort of discussions that are taking place, I mean, understand, for instance, the permanent secretaries group have agreed like a recovery strategy, but as yet that's not been signed off. What's the?
Well, the minister had some reservations about it and concerns about it, so there's been dialogue with the minister. There's a paper with him currently, which he's looking at, and which the intention was would go to the executive for general agreement about how we would deal with the next stages of that.
And Stephen, would you, as well, there's to wish you all the best for your retirement.
Sorry, can I just clarify, the 9.7 days that Stephen has spoken about was our performance as at the end of the third quarter. As at the end of the year, we're actually at 9.4 days.
That's right. Sorry, I knew it was more than 1 day, so it's down from 10.6 to 9.4.
Okay, thank you. Thanks for that. One of the things that the members here have taken quite an interest in are the social clauses included in government contracts. And at a previous meeting, I see that it has achieved green status. At a previous meeting, we were told that there would be an evaluation report done on the social clauses, and that we would be provided with that report. To date, we haven't received it. Can you give us an indication of where it is or where it's at?
Yeah, the green status is because our role was to produce the guidance, which has been done, and put in an arrangement for monitoring. Now, I can't remember when the guidance actually went in. It's not a full year yet, so we haven't had a full year's worth of monitoring of the outcome. And the guidance is permissive in the sense that there are certain things that people have to do, but departments can go further if they wish. So we'll have to collect the information. I'll need to check on where they are. We've got 10 departments reporting progress. But we've been round and have got some information from them. We haven't got a full evaluation report that we can share, but we will do that and we'll share it with the committee.
So it's in the process
It
of...
is, yeah.
Right, okay, thank you. Mitchell?
Yeah, thank you. And Stephen, all the very best.
Thank you.
It has been a pleasure working with you over the years, I have to say. The re-accreditation process for the COPs, and you'll know that I've had an abiding interest. Re-accreditation, does that just simply mean that their current accreditation has run out and they have to be rebranded, or?
Well, yes, they are accredited or re-accredited on a regular basis. We've been through that process. As you'll recall, we changed the process of accreditation to make it more rigorous. All the COPs have been through that re-accreditation process. 2 didn't get through it, the Housing Executive and the Health and Estates Investment Group. And they're in sort of, there are oversight arrangements in place for managing their recovery to get them up to re-accreditation. And indeed, the Health Estates is moving into Central Procurement Directorate. The Health Minister has decided that he wants to shift that function into CPD, and it will be managed by CPD in future. So that re-accreditation process was a more stringent review of how they're performing, looking not only at the policies in place, but also at the operation of some of those policies.
And is that available in a written form that we could have a look at?
Should be.
I mean, is it a generic process for each COPE, or are they?
Yes, it's done separately for each COPE, and it's done in a sort of gateway review type process. I'll need to check. Some of those gateway things are held as sort of in confidence, because the people are encouraged to be very frank as part of the process, and there's a worry about whether it'll come out. But I'll check. There shouldn't be any reason why you shouldn't see.
Yeah. I mean, it's in everybody's interest that the credibility of the COPs as well as the accreditation is improved, and I have to say, reassured to hear that it's a more stringent approach. And I suppose the aspect of it that I would want to know about is that this, at the end of the day, is going to ensure that there is a consistent performance which can be scrutinised and demonstrated, because I do think that some of them had difficulty, to put it.
Yeah, and again, I think the fact that the 2 of them didn't get through the accreditation process is an indication.
Which is, I did intend to question. So there was two, and they're fairly significant.
Yes.
COPs in themselves have failed, but the process continues to rectify those kind of issues.
We've been in discussion with the 2 departments that sponsor health in the case of Health Estates, and DSD in the case of the Housing Executive, and arrangements have been put in place for oversight.
So in total, how many COPs do we have?
6, is it?
Something of that order.
And so, what is that?
33%
of them didn't get through?
Yeah.
Okay, well then I suppose
maybe 8 in total if you count the different bits of CPD. But
it seemed to indicate that our worries were well founded, that we had some problems.
Well, yeah, and yes, and I think it's been a useful exercise from our point of view, just to make sure. I mean, some of the failures are like technical failures, but I mean there are differences in processes and procedures in place, and some of them may not have measured up to best practice. So it's not, I think, necessarily they're not mortal sins all the time.
And what is the explanation for the separate or the delayed process with the Education Library Boards?
Well, we've been... No. If ESA had been created, then ESA would have been presumably the COPE for the education system. The continuing delay over ESA and the uncertainty about what's going to happen has meant that we've continued with the current arrangements. We need to talk to the Education Minister about what he wants to do now, if he's proceeding with a different model for education administration, and how that sits, and that needs to be resolved, but it hasn't been capable of being resolved while we've been waiting for ESA.
And does that mean that the re-accreditation process could be sitting on the shelf as long as these are?
I hope not, yes.
That's what
Well, I mean, yes, in the sense
not.
that the Education Life Board system have been outside our system, and you know, we've been waiting for a structure to be put in place. It is at least possible that the function may move into CPD as well, but that's a decision for the Education Minister.
And the green status then, notwithstanding that agreed delay, that reflects performance outputs,
Yes.
you know, not just kind of meeting deadlines, but you know, it wasn't a tick box exercise. There were specific improvements that had to be demonstrated for re-accreditation.
Yes, every review process threw up issues to be addressed by each of the COPs. Even if they got through, if they were re-accredited, they still had issues to be addressed. Like CPD, for example, had issues to be addressed, and those are being done.
Okay, that seems to be generally positive. I mean, I think that I look forward to hearing that the two outstanding ones have also been.
Well, Health Estates is scheduled to move into CPD in October, I think. So that will bring it under CPD. There'll be a new division within CPD which will manage it, and that'll be right under our control then.
Two significant areas of work, and I can understand that there's complex issues here.
Has an investment strategy of about £1 billion, so it's a big building.
Thank you, Chair, and Stephen, all the best again. Thank you.
Thanks, Mitchell. Leslie?
Yes, I also wish you well as you take on your new role. It'll not be as well paid, but it'll be much more fun. The question I want to ask you about is one of the areas that obviously you achieved your targets, and that's on R10 and 11 about the inefficient space.
Yeah.
Can you define that and tell me just what is the extent of it throughout the department and indeed the state as a whole?
Right, I probably don't have figures exactly with me, but I mean, the standards under Workplace NI are somewhere between 10 and 12 square metres per person. Traditional office buildings, cellular accommodation would quite often be 16, 17, 18 and maybe even higher square metres per person, because there's a lot of circulation space that isn't used. There's a lot of meeting rooms that may not be as intensively used as they should be, and people have more space than they actually need. So there isn't a sort of hard-edged target, but that's the sort of differential we're looking to remove, from getting down from 16, 17 plus, in some cases up to 20 square metre, down to 10 to 12.
Bit like the old Shops and Office Premises Act?
Could be, yes.
60s?
Right.
You wouldn't remember those?
I don't remember those. But I mean, that's the difficulty for us is that, as you recall, this was part of a bigger scheme in Workplace 2010, which was going to pass all the government assets over to private contractors who would then refurbish to more intensive usage standards and move us back in and then rent the accommodation to us. That all fell apart, and civil service office accommodation isn't something that tends to be a terribly high priority for investment. So we haven't got a strategy now. What we've got are a set of guidelines to achieve and a policy or a set of tactics that involve us looking for the best options. For example, I talked about John Wilkinson's organisation, LPS, are moving into a new headquarters building in Lanyon Place, down beside the Waterfront Hall. That'll get them out, I think, of 6 buildings in the Belfast area, some of which we own, some of which are leased, and it will bring the organisation together, most of the headquarters staff together in one building. We got that as a result of NAMA. It was a building that's been held by NAMA. We've got a very favourable deal with the developer who's fitting it out for us as part of the process, and it will achieve savings and allow us to shuffle the pack. What we're trying to do is move as many staff as we can out of leased accommodation and into accommodation that we own. So we cease to pay leasehold rents and so on. And we're doing quite well. We're making a bid to the executive, I think, for some 40 million as part of the asset management strategy to give us a sort of invest to save. Right, because we've been, what we've done is try and use what money's available occasionally to attack a particular problem. We haven't got a strategy because we don't have a budget. And you can't really form a strategy without a budget. If we get access to 40 million's worth of invest to save money, then we could really begin thinking about, well, what are the key priorities here? How can we lubricate the system and get staff into more efficiently used accommodation and save our running costs? We've done quite well in that.
Do you have a handle, though, on the amount of space that remains in the department and in the
It's
Civil
not
service estate
it's
as a
inefficient. I mean, I've seen. I haven't got the figures with me, but I mean, we've got figures on and we can
Provide those,
probably in the asset management strategy. I think. Yeah.
There will be available, it's just
Yeah.
we don't have them here now, so yeah.
But
I can
we'll get them for
provide
you.
Just two other points on that, Stephen, and that is that does that take into account the amount of vacant space altogether, and how do you factor in something for flexible working, which is under discussion at the moment as well?
Yeah. Well, the space standards, for example, in LPS, I haven't got the figures with me, but the intention is not to have one desk per person. So there'll be fewer desks than there are people, because we expect people to be out of the office, either out working or not always, on site, as people are on leave, people are doing all sorts of things. So we do take account of, in a sense, an over-occupation of the space. So the space for 100 people actually will hold 110, because there will always be 10 people who are out of the office doing other things. So that's one aspect of it. We haven't got an overlying policy. I think we've been waiting for the committee to come back to us on flexible working. And we have a large number of policies that enable staff to work flexibly. We don't have a home working policy. But we do have lots of other flexibilities in the system. People can and do work away from the office. There are IT arrangements. You can go into another office and log into your computer system from another terminal. You can obviously use Blackberries and mobile phones and such things. So in that sense, there isn't. We don't have a target to have, for example, 10% of our staff or 20% of our staff working from home. So we don't have a built-in element like that in our policy on office accommodation, but we are seeking to reduce the amount of staff per person, reduce the number of desks per head of the staffing, and move into more flexible accommodation that doesn't have internal walls that have to be taken down every time something changes or something expands or new units created, whatever it may be. So but we do need decant space. For example, at the moment, the Department of Employment and Learning are decanting out of Adelaide House across the road into Clarence Court, so that Adelaide House can be refurbished to the new standards and open plan standards, and then they'll move back in there and they will bring staff in from other offices where they have people down the PwC offices down in the riverfront, and from another office in Wellington Place, and bring them all into one building. So those sorts of things are happening. But they're being done as and when we find the resources to do them. What we really need is a decent-sized budget that would allow us to plan a real strategy for moving the office estate around. There shouldn't be a lot of actually vacant office accommodation, but we can check the figures for you and see.
Thank you.
Okay. Michaela.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. Thank you. And Stephen, I too would like to wish you the very best for the future in your retirement. And I believed I missed a loving last week in the PAC.
Yes, well, I'm not sure if being told I was a robust defender of the department by Mr. Dalit was a loving. I'm not so sure. I don't know if it was a compliment or a piece of sarcasm, but
take it as a compliment.
Take it as a compliment, thank you.
And indeed, I did enjoy working with you on the PAC. Just in relation to the customer satisfaction survey results, in terms of the findings, were there any notable findings compared to previous survey results? And if so, were there particular areas where the departments could have improved on?
I mean, I haven't compared with previous years. I can't offhand think of anything that was any major swings in the outcomes. Well, I need to look at that and check and come back to you on it. But
so
nothing, sprang out at me as an obvious either vast improvement or vast reduction. So I don't think there's been a huge change year on year.
So
but
there was nothing really, no action to be identified in terms of.
No, other than sort of reaching actions of keeping. We set the targets for customer satisfaction and improving year on year. So I don't.
So obviously it was green, it was achieved.
Yeah.
What was the target? What was the percentage of customers that were satisfied here?
That's a good question. Colleagues tell me now.
I don't know what the I know pretty much every business area had surveyed their customers, and I think it was a number of different surveys across the different business areas. So the performance measures would have been different for the different areas, and I don't think we have those numbers today.
Nisra, I know, was 96%, I think, and then they achieved their figures. But they vary across departmental areas, they're not all the same. There isn't a single figure.
I remember the board being pleasantly surprised at the high levels of satisfaction there on occasion.
Yeah, surprised and a bit sceptical maybe, but yes. But we'll get those figures for you.
Yeah, no bother, thank you.
Okay, thanks, Michaela. Adrian?
Yeah, just as a follow on from about the decamp situation, Stephen, just to let you know there's plenty of space in the county hall in Coleraine. And also, you know, we don't want no decamp, we want somebody moved there permanently.
Yeah.
And I think that's something we need, as a permanent site, we need to pass on to your successor as well, that there is a big place down there, and keep that at the top of the agenda if you can.
Yeah, I see.
Same applies in Strabane also.
Okay, we'll bear that in mind. When we have been looking for the possibility of identifying functions that could transfer to County Hall, and that work's going on. And you know, we are working closely through corporate HR with DOE and with other departments and trying to facilitate moves.
It's reassuring it's going on. I mean,
it is, yes, it is.
Thanks.
Stephen, you can consider those two options after you've fully explored Newry. Once again, thanks very much, and just repeat what has been the view of all members, and thanking you for your work with the committee here and with the department, and wishing you every happiness in your retirement.
Thank you.
And thanks to Catherine and Bridget for attending here today. Thank you.
Can I repeat what I said at the PAC? I mean, for me personally, it's been a personal and professional pleasure to have been involved with the Devolved administration for the last 12 years or so. You know, that was something I didn't experience for the first. I joined in 1975, so I didn't experience that.
Okay.
And it has been an interesting and enjoyable, literally an enjoyable time working with local politicians and seeing local politics happen here. So, you know, very, very satisfying way to end my career for me. You know. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Thank you. Okay, members, I think Bridget's staying on for a minute or two. Is that right, Bridget? Yeah.
Yep.
And we're going to deal with the business plan 14-15. Sorry, the savings performance against DFP savings delivery plans, and Bridget's going to give us a summary of the performance.
Okay, thanks, Chair. As you can see from the paper provided, the department's continued to meet our savings delivery target in 13-14, and we've delivered the planned level of savings there for the third year in a row. But unlike the first 2 years, we've not exceeded our savings this time. And I'm sure you'll understand that as the amounts get higher, it does become harder for us to deliver. To put things in context, 2.1 million, which is what we delivered in 13-14, was around 7% of our 13-14 budget allocation. The 14-15 planned savings of 13.4 million will be nearly 7.5% of the budget allocation for that year. We're still confident that we'll be able to achieve that level of savings. We've had 3 years to plan for it, so we're comfortable that we can continue to deliver on that. Most of the savings we have delivered over the budget period 2011 to 15 have been achieved through rationalising our service delivery. So effectively, mostly we've continued to provide a high quality service for less money. For example, we've talked today already about the work we've been doing on reducing the size of the office estate and saving money there. We've also been renegotiating some of our contracts on more favourable terms and making savings through embedding shared services like IT Assist and Account NI. So we'll be able to continue some of that work into 15-16, and as we've talked today, particularly around the focus on the office estate and the asset management strategy, and collaborative procurement being another key example as to how we can continue to rationalise and be more efficient. But I think we're facing an inevitability that to deliver greater level of savings beyond where we're at the end of 14-15 will require reductions in service delivery levels if continued public expenditure projections are as we expect. So I'm happy to take any questions.
Sure, yeah. So the department plans to achieve savings of around 13.4 million during the year 14-15. Are you confident that this will be achieved?
Yes, I am. I mean, a lot of the nature of a lot of our savings are that they are ongoing. So when we remove a lease from our property portfolio, that saving that we made in year one of the budget continues to roll forward. So, I mean, effectively, the additional savings we're trying to deliver are 1.3 million, the difference between the 12.1 and 13.4. So I suppose when you put it in that context, it doesn't appear such a difficult target as it would be if we were trying to do 13.4 million from a standing start. So I suppose that's what I mean in terms of having had 3 years to plan to gradually build up to the 13.4 million. That's what gives me a level of confidence that it will be achieved.
And are all the target areas on track?
Yes, they are at the moment.
Okay. In the paper that you provided with us with this, page 94 of our packs here, it says that you hope to have savings over the 4-year period of £400,000 coming from other bodies.
Yes.
What are these other bodies, and why has the target not increased over the period?
We don't have very many other bodies, and it's primarily the Special Europeans Programme Body, SEUPB, and they were set a target of 3% a year of savings, but their budget is quite small, and so although it's showing as 0.1 million a year, it's gone from something that was just above 0.05 million up to something that's just below 0.15 million, if you see what I mean. So it is actually a rising target. It's just it still rounds to a relatively small number.
I understand. Yes. Just go back to the 13.4. Are there any opportunities to exceed that?
We will always look for opportunities to make greater levels of savings than we can, and I think we've demonstrated that in the first couple of years of the budget where we have exceeded our savings target. It's simply that as the numbers get bigger, it becomes harder. So I wouldn't like to promise anything in excess of 13.4 million, but certainly if opportunities arise, we will be the first people to come forward and look for them.
Okay. Yeah, Ian, I wasn't sure whether you were...
That's fine, thanks.
So, Paul?
Thank you very much indeed. Bridget, just to come in on a point that, and appreciate we've shown a saving, or a projected saving there of 3.5 million in procurement for 14-15.
Yes, they are.
I'm wondering, have we any mechanism in place to ensure that where we say we're making a saving, we're not actually just reallocating? Now, by that I mean where you can clearly demonstrate that if somebody orders a particular item from somebody, I'm just using this as an example, that they don't actually have that, because it's been allocated to one department to actually class as savings. There's not somebody else doing equally dual accounting along the way, where there's orders going in from another department for the same thing. I have actually identified this through the Department of Health. Just give you one example, where they have decided that they will use one person to supply them with stationery, and that is the way it's done. You order up staples, and instead of getting staples, you get staplers along with the staples, because they don't have staples available. And as a consequence of that, the department are actually, yes, because we have classed, we've went out to tender, and we think we're getting better value for money, but they're getting staples, but they're buying the staples along with staplers, because that's the way it was done. It was done as a package. And it doesn't mean you're getting any saving. Is there any way to ensure that those are not just pieces, numbers on a sheet of paper, because paper refuses nothing, to ensure that we're not actually getting more, but we actually are saving?
Yeah, I mean,
Very nice stapled.
at the start of the budget period, when each of the business areas signed up to these numbers, I took the money out of their budget. So
it's removed.
So it's gone. So they can't spend it, because they haven't got it anymore. So
I'm happy. That's the point. I'm happy to hear that the money is actually removed from the budget. It's not actually lost in some other area where they've actually created another title where you can actually have a slush fund gathered up somewhere.
No, it's taken away from them. Now, that's not to say, I mean, I think it's only fair and to incentivise people to continue to work to savings above that. If somebody makes a small saving below the budgetary de minimis limit over and above that amount, I may not insist that they perfectly happy for them to reinvest that into their own activities, provided, as I say, that it's within the budgetary rules and is a relatively small amount of money. But certainly, I know that particular amount of money has gone from their budget.
That's fine. I'm happy enough to hear that.
It's getting down to, well, near enough to brass tacks. Staples, anyway. Okay, Leslie.
Very good. So you're selling staplers as well? Does that mean that there's a wee sideline there?
I think it's maybe the Department of Health, but
They're buying them from a supplier.
Could I ask you, Bridget, about savings are real savings. They have to be real savings. But could I suggest to you, if I take the example I was discussing with Stephen there just a while ago, if you take, for example, and it's shown on the schedule, reduction of leases, where you decide either to move people around, to close places temporarily, perhaps for refurbishment or whatever, or have capital spend, that then effectively could release the savings that you're looking for.
yes.
Is that, I don't want to sound cynical, but is that really a genuine saving if you've actually used capital in the process?
Okay.
Redemption.
When we look at our office refurbishment project, so when we do the business case for our office refurbishment project, we will look to make sure that that capital investment has an appropriate payback period. And we have found that the payback periods for most of our office refurbishment projects, because we've got a long way to, we've got a big, a large number of properties that have very space inefficient. The first few refurbishments that we're in the process of doing, and the ones that we've been doing over the last sort of 7 years, have yielded very short payback periods. Now, those payback periods will lengthen, and there probably will come a time when it's not worth investing the capital for the revenue savings, but I think we're a long way off that yet, and the business case for each individual capital investment will assess that.
So you're happy enough then that the expenditure on capital produces the savings for you? It's a win-win situation?
Yes, I mean, I think we have to recognise that the capital investment needs to happen up front in order to drive those savings, but what we're seeing is that we might invest the capital now, but within 5 years we've saved back that money, and then we continue to not pay those leases beyond that sort of 5-year period. So we make the money, we make more of a return on that capital investment simply than getting the capital back. It continues to pay back beyond that as well.
Finally, could I ask you then the number of leases that you anticipate surrendering during the next financial year?
I'm not sure I have that figure with me. I'll have a look. If I don't have it with me, I can certainly provide it to you.
Thank you.
Okay. Bridget, thanks very much. I don't think there are any further questions. Thank you very much. And any further information which becomes available, you'll provide it to us.
Okay. We will be providing you with 6 monthly updates on that. So if nothing else, will be another update will be with you in October.
That's fine. Thank you. Okay, members, we'll move on to item number 9, I think it is, correspondence, and I'll ask the clerk to address that.
Chair, I think there's just one item of correspondence that requires a decision. It's at page 101 of the pack. The Employers for Childcare is writing to the committee regarding childcare payments bill, proposed to introduce a legislative consent motion, and they're trying to establish which committee it will fall to, but I understand it's OFM, DFM committee, so just if the committee's content enough to forward it to that committee.
Agreed?
Agreed.
Yeah.
Thank you. Any others, Shane?
Don't think anything else requires decision, it's just for no nature.
We move on then to item number 10, the committee work programme. It's at pages 111 to 112. Members content that the work programme is updated to reflect any agreements made today and published on the committee's website.
Great.
Thank you. Draft memorandum of understanding on the budget process. At its meeting of 15th of January 2014, the committee considered the draft memorandum of understanding MOU, which was jointly prepared by committee staff and DFP officials. While the committee was content with the first draft, the Minister was also to give it consideration concurrently. Our members agreed that we write to the Minister to request an update on his consideration of the draft MOU.
Great.
Agreed. Okay, do any members have any other business? None, thank you. The date, time and place of the next meeting is Wednesday the 25th of June, 10 AM, room 30, Parliament Buildings. Members content? Agreed. Committee does now adjourn in that case.
Ireland Assembly, Committee Room 30.